live.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Children's Scrutiny Panel of Kirklees Council. It's Thursday, the 13th of August at 2 o'clock. Really warm welcome to anybody who's watching, joining us this afternoon or watching at a future date. Just a reminder to everybody who's involved in the meeting this afternoon that it's been recorded for archive purposes. So just a quick round of introductions. I'm going to ask members of the panel to introduce themselves, and then officers will introduce themselves when they're presenting reports during the afternoon. So I'm Andrew Marchington, Kirklees councillor and chair of the Children's Scrutiny Panel. Paul White, introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Paul White. I'm also Kirklees councillor and the panel member.
Linda.
I'm Linda Summers. I'm a statutory co-optee on the panel.
Paul Davis.
Yeah, I'm also Kirklees councillor for Home Valley South, and I'm a panel member.
Tony.
I'm Tony Bromley, and I'm a co-optee for Children's Scrutiny Panel.
And I don't know if Dale's managed to get her audio working, but she's a member of the panel. Well, I think we've also got Dale O'Neill joining us, who's a co-optee to the panel as well. So thank you, members, for your attendance this afternoon. Any panel members got an interest to declare in items on the agenda? No, we're not. Thank you. Right, item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 2nd of July, virtual meeting. Can we approve those as a correct record of that meeting? Thank you, panel members. That's great. Thank you, Lee, for those minutes. Okay, so this is a meeting that's held in public, and there's nothing on the agenda this afternoon would require us to exclude the public from that. We've had no notification of either deputations or petitions, and no members of the public have indicated they would like to ask any questions this afternoon. So we're going to into item 7 on the agenda. That's page 9 in the public pack, and it's an SEND update. So Ronnie, would you like to introduce yourself and introduce a report? Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Councillor Marchington. So I'm Ronnie Hartley. I'm Head of Educational Safeguarding and Inclusion, and I'm going to be presenting the SEND Progress update. Okay. I'm trying to do 2 things with the report presented this afternoon, is to give an overview of the impact of COVID-19 in relation to SEND Progress, and also to provide an update on the SEND improvement plan and where we are in our improvement journey in Kirklees. So to summarise at the start of the report, the ambition for Kirklees is that all children with and young people with SEND live and are educated in Kirklees. Children and young people have the best start in life, and children with SEND make good educational progress and have high aspirations and good life opportunities. So part of our improvement journey is being very aware, similar to other local authorities, we've faced an increased challenge in demand in education, health and care plans and subsequent rise in costs. That has led to some significant pressure on our high needs block, which we all need to address together across the whole SEND system. And we are fully committed to implementing the SEND reforms, and we have full support from Kirklees Council Cabinet and all partners in the SEND system. So we have invested quite a lot of support into the improvement journey to make sure we can deliver that ambition at pace. And that has also included commissioning Empower as an improvement partner to support us in clarifying our collective ambition for children and young people with SEND in Kirklees. So the first part of the report is to capture the impacts of on children and their families of the COVID public health pandemic, and then to provide an update on the progress in relation to the SEND improvement plan. So as part of the coronavirus pandemic, the government legislated on SEND to strike the right balance between the needs of children and young people to be protected and receive the right support in a timely way, and to manage the demands on local authorities. So we had two key amendments, which are national amendments. So Section 42 of the Children and Families Act, which is about securing the duty on local authorities or commissioning health bodies to secure and arrange provision for children and young people with SEND, was temporarily modified. This temporary modification was removed at the end of July 2020, so the full statutory duty to provide what is specified in an education, health and care plan has now been reinstated, and this applies to local authorities and health commissioning bodies. And the SEND coronavirus amendment regulations amend the statutory timescale that we have to carry out an education, health and care assessment and issue a final plan. That amendment remains in place nationally until the 25th of September. The Department for Education has committed to keep that under review, and where there needs to be any flexibility locally to respond to outbreaks, we may have further modifications applied. So in summary, the local authority and commissioning health bodies are still required to carry out their education, health and care plan assessments, undertake annual reviews and finalise plans. However, if the statutory process takes longer as the direct result of COVID-19, the statutory timescale can be extended to take this into account, but we must do all we can to ensure that plans are finalised within statutory timescales. So another key thing I just wanted to update on is that Kirklees and it's a national survey will be participating in a monthly special educational needs and disability survey. It started in July with the aim of tracking current and forthcoming pressures in the local authority SEND teams and to provide informed judgments about temporary legislative changes. This will include information about current casework, educational psychology capacity, as that potentially is a real challenge as we move through in relation to COVID, and the level of new referrals and applications of COVID exceptions to assessment timescales. A note on area SEND inspections. So during the autumn term, Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission will not be carrying out area inspections, but will undertake a joint Ofsted Care Quality Commission visit to ensure to support the SEND system following COVID-19 disruption. The visits are not inspections and will give insights into how the SEND system is working. And then once the current cycle of inspections is completed, there will be a new inspection framework with a continuous cycle of inspections, sharper inspection focus on the experience of children and young people with SEND and their families, and greater prominence of the quality, integration and commissioning of education, health and care services for children and young people with SEND. Okay, I just wanted to mention COVID-19 education, health and care plan risk assessments. So in line with the Department for Education guidance, schools were asked in March to undertake an individual risk assessment for every child or young person with an education, health and care plan. What I do want to say in Kirklees, the requirement was that local authorities had oversight of the risk assessments. We made the request to our schools and settings in Kirklees that they actually return them to the local authority. That was a request, it was guidance, it wasn't a statutory requirement that they return them. However, we did make that ask, and we worked with our schools and negotiated with, so that was done in partnership with our SEN assessment service and our community hub leads within early support. So it isn't to say that schools did not carry out an individual risk assessment, but we didn't get them back in the authority in every case. But actually we got a really good sample back into the authority that enabled us to do some analysis of that data. So those assessments we're looking at was the child or young person able to have their needs met at home and be safer there than attending an educational establishment at the time. With additional provision, could the child or young person have their needs met at home, or would it be safer for the young person to be at school? We supported them through the community hub model, as I've already indicated, with additional teams overseeing children and young people outside of the model. So SENDAC did some work with some of our out of authority providers, or children without a named school. We had support for children and young people in early years. Educational safeguarding service and also social care were involved in that. We did some work with families where children are electively home educated but have an education, health and care plan, and with our colleges and further education providers. So there is some information about the risk assessments that were returned and where it was felt that school was safer. We worked with those families to support access to education. We did some analysis of the returns and determined that 71% of pupils with a plan were at the time safer at home than in school or post-16 provision. 20% safer at home with some form of educational outreach offer in place and welfare call and checks in place, and 9% of pupils with a plan were safer at school. From July, schools may find it useful to complete an individual risk assessment for a child with an EHCP, but there is no requirement for it to be returned to the local authority, as the clear message is that all children and young people should be returning to school. Okay. So in terms of new education, health and care assessments during the COVID pandemic, we have seen a decline during COVID-19, which is reflective of the regional and national picture, which is to be expected given the significantly reduced numbers of children and young people in school. However, we're acutely aware that this is likely to increase significantly as schools open to increasing numbers of children and young people. Our SEN panel process has continued virtually on a weekly basis to enable timely processing of all new requests. So during the COVID period, we have, and I've supplied some data there, we've received 567 new education, health and care assessment requests. We've not assessed 199 of those because they didn't meet the criteria, and we've taken the decision to assess 491. The data that's supplied is on a month-by-month basis, and so that kind of indicates the numbers that we've seen, and we have seen that we have seen a decline during the COVID pandemic and some of the restrictions that have been in place. Statutory compliance. So given what I said about the modifications to the legislative framework, the SEN assessment team in partnership with Family Schools, Health and Social Care has maintained compliance as an average of 70.6% across the academic year. This compares positively with regional and statistical neighbours. However, we are doing further work to improve this compliance further. Annual reviews. The local authority has still been required to undertake annual reviews, and schools have been doing these remotely since lockdown with parents and children and young people as appropriate, participating electronically or submitting their comments on paper. I think I've seen some really inspirational and fantastic practice with how these have been carried out. So schools that have actually made facilities available for parents to come into school where they've not had access to digital devices to make their views known, and machines have been offered so parents can actually sit and participate in a meeting, but that's done in a socially distanced manner. Just wanted to pick up on children, young people and families' confidence. I think obviously the COVID situation has significantly impacted on everyone, but it's been acutely felt by some of our most vulnerable learners and their families. So we've provided ongoing updates and links to key educational resources, activities to keep children occupied, and advice and guidance on mental health has been provided to families of children and people with an EHCP through the Kirklees Council and the local offer websites, as well as updates for head teachers and SENCOs through our main form of communication, which is called Heads Up in Kirklees. We've also written individually to all parents and carers of children with an education, health and care plan to offer support during COVID, so that they're really clear who that support is that has been available from. We've also produced a newsletter with frequently asked questions, which has been co-produced with our parent and carer forum, which has gone out to all families. Our educational psychology service has produced a number of social stories to support children in making sense of the COVID-19 situation, and key documents for supporting the transition back into school for children and young people, and support for families and staff. That document has been extremely well received and widely publicised. Kirklees will also be participating in the Returning to Schools Wellbeing Training project, which will be led in partnership between our educational psychology service and public health, and that's about a training package that will go out to all schools in Kirklees in terms of ways that we can effectively support children and young people and their families. We've really tried to promote a welcome back term message to schools and settings in Kirklees, because we're acutely aware that we have tried to put in place effective strategies for children and people who are vulnerable, but we're also trying to plan for some unknowns about children that may come back in September who we wouldn't have typically expected not to cope well with the transition back, but they're the children that we're trying to plan for. So redirecting some of our psychology resources and some of our social, emotional, mental health resources to put in place effective support that will be required in September. Supporting and building families' confidence that it's safe for them to send their children back to school will take time and needs not to be rushed. So similarly, for some children, they are in a new at-home routine and it'll take time for them to get back into school. So other people have commented that actually there's quite a lot of work that's been ongoing to actually support that effective transition back to school in September. School attendance penalty notice during the COVID-19 situation. We suspended all penalty and prosecutions as of the 1st of March until further notice. Any unpaid penalty notice is issued from the 1st of January, did not result in prosecution. Kirklees was trying to support families across the authority who could be in financial difficulties, so that is really important. So we want to make sure that we don't put undue additional pressure on families at this time, and the decision to reinstate penalty notices and prosecutions will be reviewed in line with government advice when social distancing measures are further relaxed or removed. Okay, so that's my kind of update on the implications and impact of COVID-19 in relation to SEND progress. Councillor, do you want me just to continue through the rest of the report or pause now? I think you're on mute, Councillor Marchington.
Thank you. I was. Yeah. Questions or comments on the COVID update part of the report? We're fine. No, fine. If you want to continue,
Okay,
then Rob.
I'll continue. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the SEND 10-point improvement plan. So we've got a really clear improvement plan in place for Kirklees. So I just wanted to provide a brief update on where we are in terms of progress. So the plan was developed in October 19 and it's consolidated areas for development identified through our high needs review and our peer review and challenge. So SEND technical capacity, I just wanted to mention this. So this was additional SEND capacity has been secured in two ways. So through the commission with Empower that I've referred to earlier, while working with us to clarify the shared ambition for children and people with SEND in Kirklees and ensuring that the pressures on our high needs block are tackled collectively across the whole SEND system. Empower's work was paused during COVID-19 but was restarted in July. Also, following an extensive national search, we have secured some additional SEND professionals to support us on our SEND improvement journey, and they will be leading on to critical reviews in the autumn term on specialist provision and our alternative provision, including the exclusions trail. And a member of staff will be working with our SEN assessment service on quality assurance of EHCPs and building capacity in the decision-making process. So we have come a long way in a relatively short period of time, but in terms of the 10 points in the improvement plan, so in terms of data baselining and systems management, we've established a really clear data dashboard. It's wide in scope and supports operational and strategic decision making. We've further work to do to migrate reporting to build on ensure that we've got business continuity and that we're connecting different parts of data across the SEND system. And so there is some further work to be done there, but I think we've really developed something that's really strong and enables us to effectively monitor performance. Governance arrangements for SEND are now clear. So we have a SEND Improvement Board that has oversight of the implementation of the SEND Improvement Plan, and the Health and Wellbeing Board has strategic oversight of special educational needs and disabilities. Quite a lot of work has been done at looking at a sustainable financial strategy for SEND, and there will be Empower working with us on establishing a sustainable high needs approach. Schools Forum have led on looking at the funding of how we fund SEND in our schools, in our mainstream schools, and a consultation paper will be coming out to all schools in the autumn term regarding some revisions to the SEND funding bands. Sufficiency of places across the SEND system. We commissioned Bond Bryan, a Sheffield-based architectural company, to work with us on sufficiency of special school places, particularly for our social, emotional and mental health and autism population. And they've undertaken initial feasibility of sites across Kirklees. The next phase of this work will be commissioned later this year. And one of the SEND specialists that we've appointed will lead on reviewing our specialist provision, our resource provision in mainstream school, and alternative provision, including the exclusions trail. Joint commissioning arrangements. Work is underway to review our current commissioning arrangements, supported by Empower, and analysis of current education, health and care plans to determine how we commission jointly across education, health and care. Transition arrangements. So we've developed good practice guidance to support effective transitions for children and young people. Work is underway with Kirklees College and other post-16 provision and adult services, looking at post-16 and preparation for adulthood. Performance management and quality assurance is in place and will be further embedded across the next 12 months. This links with our data dashboard, so we're able to really have a clear oversight and grip of that performance and quality assurance. Workforce development and the development of a universal, targeted and specialist workforce training offer is being developed, including looking at the effectiveness of our current outreach offer. Empower have been trialling a new tool, the Valuing Special Educational Needs and Disability tool with schools, which will also inform workforce development. Parent care and children and young people's voice. We have commissioned Public Consulting Group to develop a new local offer platform, which has been co-produced with our Parent and Carer Forum. We've appointed a local offer and engagement lead with some additional resource to support with this work over the next 12 months. Our local offer needs to be our front and centre main means of communication with children, young people and their families across Kirklees. And I think it's a really exciting development for Kirklees. Communication and engagement. So regular updates have been provided at special school head teachers meetings, but primary and secondary heads meetings. The SENCO networks will continue alongside updates on Heads Up through the local offer and production of newsletters for parents and carers. Further work has been undertaken to ensure that children and young people's engagement is developed fully through the existing services such as the Kirklees Youth Alliance. Okay, so that's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour through the progress that's been made against the SEND Improvement Plan.
Thank you, Ronnie. Questions or comments from the panel? I think, Paul, did you have some? Paul White?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ronnie, for that report. It was very informative, lots of really good stuff in there. I've got two questions, actually. One's quite specific about some data and the other one's much more general. So I'll start with a specific one because it might be easy for an answer. But I'm just looking at the page 15 in the pack and the EHCA requests. And it's just a numbers thing, and I think there must be a story behind this, because we've got requests at 567, but we've got decided not to assess and those to assess of 690. Now, for the 12-month period, So I'm just wondering, is that telling us that there was quite a bit of catching up from the previous 12-month period? Or am I just misreading something there?
Okay.
Because there does appear to be some catching up during the latter few months in terms of coronavirus. And I'm just, am I interpreting that correctly? Is that what's happened?
I think it's fair to say that in relation to some of the initial capacity that could be directed towards processing annual reviews, that the initial lockdown enabled central teams to be able to catch up's possibly the wrong term, but actually direct more resource to undertaking those reviews. What we need to try and balance out across the academic year is that the calendar year or the academic year, whichever one you look at, has peaks and troughs in it. And I think what we do see, and when we compare current year data with previous years, there is a pattern with how we are able to utilise our capacity to meet our statutory duties in relation to education, health and care assessments, and ensuring that they're compliant within 20 weeks. And it follows a similar pattern. So there is some further work to do, which I kind of referred to in the report, in terms of how we stop that kind of seesaw effect in terms of year on year. And obviously this year has not been like any other year. So I think there has been some opportunity to direct resource, particularly around things like annual review at the very early part of this process. What those data tables are illustrating is we've had the amount of new requests in, the panel decision-making process to decide whether or not to assess has not agreed to assess 199 of the requests that we've had in. Now that can be for a whole range of reasons in terms of and the bit that we are unpicking in Kirklees is that the threshold in law for carrying out an assessment is quite low, but the threshold in law for issuing a plan is higher. So we tend to carry out the assessments in Kirklees and then pretty much issue 100% of the assessments that are carried out as plans. That doesn't follow the same trajectory as other authorities. We would expect to see that there is a greater percentage that are not issued as a final plan. Now, people have said that might be because we only get requests into Kirklees that are appropriate requests. I would question that. So in terms of the 199, there's a whole rest of reasons why, and I can bring to scrutiny at a later date some further analysis of the reasons why we might have taken the decision not to assess, if that would be helpful.
It would be helpful, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
The second.
Yeah.
I'll go on to the second one. And Ronnie, you've provided us with a lot of reassuring information around the support to parents and families with SEND children. But there's a sort of bigger question that I have, which is around that I know that a lot of school leaders have been really disappointed by the numbers of children that have been in settings during the lockdown, and that covers the wider children as well. In primary and high schools have been very different, but primary schools in particular. So I'm just, it's a question really about how you might be working with parents or communicating with parents to reassure them that the risks are very, very low, and the evidence does say the risks are very low in terms of children coming back into settings. But obviously, many parents are very anxious about that.
They are. So I think in the report I talked about we've done parent webinar in partnership with the Parent Carer Forum. That was really useful, and we are going to do a further webinar, but part way into that autumn term, because I think people need to get back into school. I think in terms of we're going to closely monitor attendance, but also to recognise that whereas the national message very much is that the risks are low, I think there is parental perception about that, and I think we've got to understand that, and we've got to work individually. So it's not a blanket approach with parents. It's got to be done very carefully with those parents on a case-by-case basis. And so we'll have a clearer picture in terms of children that are back into school in September. I talked about a welcome back term, and that's not about children not going back to school for the next term. It's about supporting effective transition for those children. So for the length of time that children have been out of school, in some cases, we need to start the transition as if they were starting from, it's a new transition. Some children haven't had an opportunity to visit their new schools that they're transitioning to, and I think that's absolutely more acute for some of our children and young people with SEND. So we need to take it at the right pace, because we want those transitions to be successful, and that also includes those very careful discussions that need to happen with parents. I think, but I will say that I can see, and we are planning for, that we are potentially going to see an increase, and whether that's a short-term increase or something that's more longer term in relation to our electively home educated children and young people. And we need to keep that in view, and we need to effectively plan and support for that. The other thing for me is that we are going to get parents that are really anxious, and it's going to take us as long as it takes to get them back in. And I think it has to be done we have to take a measured approach. We've got to take small steps. We've got to work alongside those parents to work in a supportive way to get them back into school and to build confidence, as much for the parents as for the children and young people. So part of our redirection of our educational psychology resource, that I'm working really closely with our parent and carer forum. I've had lots of individual discussions with parents who have been who've either been not wanting their children to go to school or wanting their children to go to school, and I think there's been a whole team approach around this. So actually across the whole of lots of different services, I think we're all kind of seeing and experiencing that. Does that help and reassure?
Yeah, thank you, Ronnie. I think
it does.
Joanne might want to come in. Yeah, Joanne might want to come in at this stage.
Thanks very much, Councillor Marchington. It's Joanne Sanders. I'm Service Director for Learning and Early Support. So just to, I suppose, reinforce what Ronnie said, obviously there's been extra care and attention with our youngsters. We've got special educational needs and disabilities, but that approach to welcoming people back is one that we are planning some wider communications with our families. So all families, because I think it applies to everybody. It's been for some a number of months now when they've either not been able to attend or have been too anxious to attend. I think the government is quite clear about their expectations. They really do want to see all youngsters back, and we want to see all youngsters back. We want to do that by building confidence and by supporting and working with our parents, and so it's really important that we take that approach. We've also been listening really carefully to our head teachers, who are acutely aware, because they're having conversations all the time as well with families. Actually, many families are really looking forward to their children attending school again in September, and I think there's been some. I've listened to several head teachers who've talked about talking with and surveying their parents and trying to understand the things that they're anxious about. Because of that, I think we've got some really good and robust processes in place to support schools, whether it's anything to do with the physical accommodation of the building or transporting youngsters to school safely. And I just want to reassure that the council is really wanting and is working alongside our schools and settings in preparation for the 7th of September. Yeah.
Thank you, John, for that contribution. Other panel members, questions or comments? Yeah, Paul Davis.
Yep, thank you, Al. Again, like Paul, it must be something about Paul's. I've got two questions as well, and I'll just take the opportunity, first of all, to ask Joanne the question, because I think it's more pertinent to herself, and she sort of led us into it. Joanne, could you just give us a view as well on how the schools will be dealing with risk assessments in general going forward? Because we talk about confidence for families, and obviously for teachers as well going forward. So I think that's probably a key issue. So it'd be really good to hear what we're planning to do.
Just checking I'm not on mute. Thank you, Councillor Davis. In terms of risk assessment, so the government, as you know, been publishing guidance, and they did a revised guidance very much with a view to September. Obviously, there was the previous term. There's some really clear guidance about what obligations are around risk assessments. We know that our schools have been keenly awaiting that guidance and have been working that through, like you say, not just for the youngsters, but also for school staff. We have got colleagues in our corporate health and safety team who have been offering some really practical advice and are available to talk through each school's risk assessment with them. And we want to encourage conversation engagement with our trade union colleagues, because they also bring some expertise to support getting this right. I think what we're just acutely aware of as well, that this is not a static position. Things are changing. We just issued a communication to our schools and settings just last week. As you'll be aware, we've got tighter restrictions currently in Kirklees. As well as a couple of neighbouring authorities. And the other thing that we're undertaking at the moment is working really closely with other West Yorkshire local authorities, so that we can work collaboratively to ensure that there's good systems and processes in place. There's some questions that we still got to work through. What does it look like where you've got cross-border movement for school staff and for youngsters, but feel very confident in terms of the work that was undertaken by schools for that wider opening will be able to be built on now for September. And where we're picking up issues, we're working through those, whether it be things like hand washing facilities or otherwise. But yeah, I think we feel that we're in as good a place as we can be.
Okay, well, thanks, and as you say, that's good to hear that we'll pick those up across Kirklees and start developing some best practice. So thanks, Joanne, thanks for that. And if I can, Andrew, one more question.
Yeah, sure.
This time for Ronnie. In your improvement plan, Ronnie, is really again good to hear about the improvements in data baselining and systems management, and I know. From my involvement in the Education Learning Partnership Board, and we've had it here as well. There's some of the presentations you made. We can sort of see some of those changes. But I'm interested in what feedback or what you've seen around the improvements in operational and strategic decision making that have come about because of those improvements in that data and systems management side. So I'd be very interested in hearing your view on that.
Okay, so can I come back with two examples?
Yeah, please.
The theme of two. So I think a couple of things really. I think what that data dashboard has enabled us to do really effectively is to look at send sufficiency, so sufficiency of places, to do some quite smart planning about how we need to forward project around numbers for particular things. So when I talked about our social, emotional and mental health numbers and our provision for children and people with autism, that's been really clear, that data dashboard, that really better analysis has enabled us to say this is how many places we will require across Kirklees for the next 10 years, year on year, and to do some quite smart analysis with what's happening at a regional and a national level. And to benchmark ourselves against other authorities far more effectively. And that is absolutely critical in terms of making sure we've got the right numbers of specialist places in terms of our special school population, the right number of resource provision. So that whole graduated approach, that windscreen wiper of appropriate provision to meet need. I think so that strategically is moved things on quite significantly. I think also having a really clear understanding, and I know Councillor Davis, you've been involved with the Worker Forum around the analysis that it's enabled us to do around funding bands, quite detailed analysis of the incidence of need at a national level and how we follow that trajectory in Kirklees, or don't, in relation to how we tightly align needs of children and young people with the provision that's required to meet their needs with our spending. I think that would be another example of where I think it's enabled us strategically to really kind of provide some oversight and grip on what's going on across Kirklees. And you know, if you say it all very quickly, it all sounds like it'll be really easy. And I think that the key thing is for me that it's every part of that SEND system has got to improve and look at how it interconnects. So it is about having that kind of strategic oversight to say, if you make changes in any one part of this system, you'll make changes in one part of the system. In order for it to have achieve the ambition that we're all trying to get to, we've got to make changes across a number of parts of the system, and they need to run in parallel as an improvement journey to enable us to have that bigger impact as an end outcome. Okay, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much, Ronnie.
Thank you. I think, Tom, did you want to, is that responding in this area?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Martin. I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Davis's question as well. I think you know,
you just want to introduce yourself, Tom.
Sorry, yeah, Tom Brailsford, Service Director for Resources Improvement and Partnership. Sorry about that.
Thank you. That's right. No.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, there's also something about us knowing ourselves better, and that increase in data and clarity really allows us as a senior leadership team to understand our statutory compliance. We understand where things are falling down in the system, or where things are improving in the system. And to build on what Ronnie was saying, and Ronnie talked about it earlier in terms of the Empower work, that there's something called the Value in SEND tool, which really is an outcome star, which triangulates children's needs with the educational settings ability to meet need and home settings ability to meet need. And we can look at kind of, that's like a scoring system, and we can look at that, and what that'll enable us to do even further is to understand gaps in the commissioning system. So we'll be able to look, you know, maybe parents aren't confident to meet needs of children with autism, let's say, and then we can look at what we can put in place in the home setting to look at that. So you know, the work that's been done clarifying the data has been really good, but I think the next stage is about moving it to kind of the outcomes and the interventions and how that informs planning, really.
I think just a quick comment, sorry, Andrew, just very quick. I think absolutely, I totally agree, absolutely crucial that we have the right, for me, the right information. You know, I'll you know, there's data, there's management information, and you know, I feel that's going in the right direction towards that, because we can end up with lots and lots of data and not really being able to do anything with it, and that's really what we need to be having, isn't it? Is that crucial management information to make those decisions as you just outlined. So yeah, thanks. Keep the progress going, and thanks very much.
Right, thank you. Linda, did you want to come in? Yeah, I think you're on mute, Linda.
Sorry, my apologies.
That's fine.
It was just picking up on something that Tom had said about moving on to the next stage around outcomes, and just really to understand in general terms how it is that parents and carers will be involved fully in assessing the outcomes and whether they're addressing their practical day-to-day issues, how their voice will continue to be heard in that.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, I mean, part of what we've been doing through the Empower work and looking at trialing the tool is working very closely with parents and carers to ensure that their voice is in there, and they actually will input into that tool in terms of looking at the outcomes, looking at how they feel, you know, the confidence to care and their confidence in meeting needs. So there'll be an integral part of that. And I think you know, it's been one of the challenges of the Children and Family Act overall, I think nationally, is how we actually measure outcomes and how we get feedback. And I think it'll put us in a really good position to be doing that. But we'll continue to kind of co-produce those solutions with parents and get feedback about how effective they think things have been.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Okay, thank you. Tony, is there anything you want to, any comment you want to make on this report? No, thank you. Okay, right. Thank you, Ronnie, for very much for that very comprehensive report and for the contributions from Joanne and Tom to that as well, and for panel members as well. So thanks, Tony, Ronnie, and we look forward to listening to future updates. Okay, all the best. Right, so we're on to item 8, which is the exploitation strategy update. I think Elaine's going to lead us into that report.
I am. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elaine McShane. I'm the Service Director for Family Support and Child Protection. So I'll give an overview and then obviously if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. So in terms of the Kirklees exploitation safeguarding strategy, this was launched in, it's for 2019-2021. It was launched earlier this year, and this provides a strategic framework to develop and strengthen our response, not only in the identification, but the assessment and intervention with children and young people. And it's through implementing a contextual safeguarding approach, and the strategy itself is overseen by the executive group of the Safeguarding Partnership, but as underneath it a strategic group that's chaired by a senior police officer with a vice chair from health, and then an operational group that's chaired by Sarah Miles, who sits in the Quality Assurance Service, alongside a police, a DCI, detective inspector in the police. And I think that's the recognition of this is very much a partnership approach, and in the nature of this work we have to work closely together to ensure that we meet the range of needs of these young people. And so the approach provides an understanding of the response to young people's experience of significant harm beyond their families. And I think that's really important, because you will see often that families become powerless to feel that they can affect change for their children. And we have in the past used what would be the child protection procedures, for example, to work within these cases. And that's not necessarily the right approach, because it can often disempower families. So we are working towards having a process that will empower families and ensure that we're providing support at the right time. As part of this work, what we've looked at as well is working with our partners around the multiple referral routes into different services. So on that point, actually what we've done is we've brought together our risk and vulnerability service with the youth offending service and the youth engagement team, and actually they're becoming what we call our youth engagement service. So it will be one service. So we've not stopped working throughout COVID. We've continued to progress that work, and really what that the central focus of that and the strategy is to ensure that children and young people receive meaningful trusted adult support at the right time and available to them from a wide range of individuals. And actually what we want to move away from is that they sit within separate services, that actually whatever the needs of the young person, it's the right individual identified to support that young person. And it may be because of where they sit in an organisation, they'll require support from someone else, the individual supporting the young person. But it's about building. When you talk to young people or you look at any research, what young people talk about is having someone that they can actually build a real long-lasting relationship that is consistent and persistent, because I think those two run hand in hand. So what we have on all child exploitation and children missing from home or care cases are discussed on a daily basis in multi-agency meetings and further explored and actioned at weekly exploitation screening panels. Alongside these, we have multi-agency child exploitation meetings, and they're embedded in practice. And again, that is a partnership approach by identifying young people, looking at what their needs are, not duplicating, because we don't want to duplicate plans, but it's about making sure there's a right plan in place, and that actually we're monitoring the progress of those plans and the vulnerability of the young people. And from those meetings, I think what's really helpful is actually that if there are increasing concerns, they can come up, through the team managers, service managers, up to myself as service director. I will have conversations with senior colleagues probably in the police if we need to do some diversion. So it's very much about having an understanding of what's happening on the ground. And it's interesting, yes, because I chaired a practice learning review where we'd looked at some cases on a partnership level around some cases where there'd been significant incidents. And I think what partners talked about is that the benefits of coming together to talk about and explore how we work in these complex settings, and then how we develop appropriate training for different parts of the service. People will be aware that Kirklees has a significant number of non-CSE inquiries, but alongside that, what we've also done is develop an active commitment to support survivors of child sexual exploitation, whether they're involved in those processes or not. And it is about that bespoke offer. It's about a not one size fits all. It's about working with individuals about, again, in adulthood, what their needs are, and developing a bespoke pathway to meet those needs. The children's missing from home and care procedures have recently been reviewed and updated, and are out with the partnership for consultation. And these have been developed in line with the national framework relating to reporting children in care and missing levels, and actually ensuring that we gather data around young people that are missing, and that data helps us inform the shaping of our services. I think some of what we've experienced previously in Kirklees is actually we have quite a number of private children's homes, and were our missing procedures robust enough to actually cover the needs of those young people as well. So we've got systems and processes in place to ensure children from other local authorities are safeguarded at the same level as our children are internally. I think one of the most important things around exploitation, in whatever the guise, because it can come in many guises, is that intelligence and information sharing, and that is reported via the partnership. And a lot of information comes in from our police colleagues, and then we explore that in more detail to look at where there are matters of concern and work together to actually address those concerns. And a lot of that is about, I think, really getting to a point where, and you'll see in the media most recently, there's been some police, not necessarily in West Yorkshire, some police activity around criminal exploitation and actually arresting adults, so to take them out of the picture. What you have to be mindful of is that can still leave young people vulnerable. So we have to be working all the time to understand what the activity is around and across Kirklees and across borders. So that's a quick update if anybody's got any questions.
Yeah. Questions or comments for Elaine? Fine. Oh, Paul Davis.
I unmuted and then muted myself.
Easily done.
Yeah, it's not specific to what you've come through, but just in terms of the difficult times we've been through and we're still going through. Yeah. Has the what if any impact has that had on the work in this area?
I think what we did very early on was develop a specific COVID strategy, which I'm actually more than happy to share with members, and actually making sure that we were monitoring. So the knowledge that we had about young people, that they didn't fall under the radar, that we were monitoring. We still have had our detached youth workers out in areas, so where we've had some intelligence, because as we know, for adolescents, they don't always do what's requested of them. So when it came to lockdown, I'm being very kind here, they don't always adhere to actually the messages that are being pointed out. So where we've seen that there's been activity in particular locations, we've had the detached youth workers going out to engage young people. So where information's coming, we've acted on that. We've not slowed down at all. In fact, quite the contrary, we've taken a more proactive approach and really ensured that actually bringing the youth engagement service together, ensure that actually young people have people touching base with them to make sure that there's not any increase in vulnerabilities as best we can.
Okay.
In such circumstances.
Yep, that's good to hear. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, and we've had a bit of a discussion about the numbers. Look at the number of children at risk from sexual exploitation and criminal exploitation. It is interesting that there's a small overlap between those two. So it seems to be the right to have actually expanded the strategy to an exploitation strategy is
and I think
made us aware of more young people.
Slavery.
Yeah.
When you look at exploitation, when you look at any element, and I think that's why we expanded it. So when you look at criminal exploitation, within that there can be an element of sexual exploitation. They don't sit in isolation.
No.
So and actually, I think what's really key is looking at the young people's vulnerabilities. Right. Rather than saying it's this type of exploitation, look at the vulnerabilities. How would we address that to then minimise any risk that actually they are potentially exposed to?
And the good partnership works in all those cases to reduce the risks for children and young people and actually protecting them.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And I have regular conversations with senior police colleagues where we share information at that higher level and that disseminates down.
Right. So that's good. So there's no other questions or comments. Thank you, Elaine, for that update on this particular strategy. It's interesting to see that developing and the responses. Again, just in our light of our, looking at scrutinising partnership working and observation. Interesting to hear about the practice learning review that you chaired. It'd be good if there's things like that in the future, if we can observe some of that work, either virtually or face to face. That's one of the things we've asked, again, particularly when you're looking at difficult cases, presuming that's anonymised work, and again it'd be useful to see some of the thoughts and processes going on around that, which helps our scrutiny work.
Certainly that's something I'll consider, because actually very recently I've taken over the chairing of the practice learning review group, so I'll be able to sort of look at those cases and definitely make it an
if we can just observe some of that work coming along, that'd be really good. Okay, thank you Elaine, for that update. I think that neatly goes on to our work programme, so we're coming towards the end of the meeting now. I think again, any opportunity, if officers just thinking ahead, we're having a meeting and we're looking at practice going on, could we invite a member of scrutiny just to observe good work going on when an agenda goes out or something like that? And I'm not saying that I don't want to put a burden on panel members, but we did find it really useful last year to go to Northolt Hall to see the really good work going on there. The youth offending team, just to sit and observe some of that go meeting. Some of the other meetings we already observe, so we have observer status at the corporate parenting board and the children's improvement board, all of that. But actually some of the day-to-day stuff or the week-to-week stuff that goes on, just for us to observe that, and it really allows us to corroborate some of the work that's some of the good reports or good work that we see going on here. So that'd be really good. So I think the other thing I'd like, and it's the issue of the day, isn't it? Our thoughts with all those young people who are receiving their A-level and their BTEC results today. We hope that as many young people in Kirklees have achieved the results they want and can move on to the pathways. But I think particularly the concern we've had about children and young people in some of the areas of Kirklees, about if we can at some stage at the appropriate time have a bit of an analysis of how this year's way of us allocating A-level and BTEC results, what impact that's had on some of the pathways for young people in our area. I'm sure panel members will be interested to know what's happened. And again, we've got GCSE results coming out. Is it in a week's time?
Next week,
Yeah, and again, looking at, has there been a disproportionate impact on some of our children and young people in the light of that. So not to put a lot of pressure on at the moment, but at some stage I think we do need to look at that. And it's again part of us wanting to look at the improvement journey in terms of educational outcomes. Sorry, Mel, did you want to come in at that stage?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it might be.
Introduce yourself, Mel.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Then
Sorry, and I missed the first part of the meeting.
That's
so
fine.
I'm Mel Meggs, I'm the Director for Children's Services. So I just thought, and I haven't had a chance to talk this through with Joe yet, but I think we will understand better the impact of the children missing part of their schooling as we get to the end of the autumn term. So I think in terms of scheduling, perhaps bringing something that's not just about the numbers and how many got their exam results they were expecting and weren't, but actually what we're picking up from schools around what's been the impact of children working at home, learning at home, or not, as the case may be, I think would be really helpful. So I think children will need, and the school system will need a term really to properly understand what that's been. So what impact has it had on their progress, if any? Because we do make a lot of assumptions, don't we? So we need to sort of see that work through really. So what impact has it had on their learning? How are schools able to respond, and what help and support do they need to help children catch up? But as important, I think, is what impact has it had on their social and emotional well-being, and how is that being picked up? I think, and how has our school system really supported children through that, what we're calling the long transition period, I think, because they're not just, some children are not just transitioning between schools, but they're having to transition from home to school in a way that we've never had before, really. So what have we learned from that? So I think maybe at the end of the autumn term, bringing some of that learning that I'm sure will be shared with the Learning Partnership, and will underpin some of our sort of strategies for the way we want to work and what extra support we need to provide children going forward. So the end of the autumn term, I suppose I was suggesting, would be a good time to do that.
Yeah. Linda, did you want to come in? You might need to unmute yourself and then come in. Sorry.
So sorry, I will get the hang of this one.
Yeah.
Just to come back to the narrower point, I think the wider report you talk about would be immensely useful. I completely agree with that. But just on the narrower point about the A-level results today, there is some emerging discussion on social media today that educational institutions with larger cohorts have been downgraded from their centre assessment grades more than smaller places.
Right.
And in a local authority area where 82% of 18-year-olds are in big educational establishments, i.e. the 3 colleges, potentially Kirklees is disproportionately affected by that. So it might be quite useful not only to have a look at how our own performance has been impacted by the process that's been applied this year, but how that compares elsewhere.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda, for that input. I mean, and again, perhaps some of the connections we've made with DFE during this particular period in time, whether we can, if that is a significant issue for Kirklees, the data's available, obviously the raw data's available, we can have a look at that and sort of use some of our contacts to raise that issue as a local authority and as a scrutiny panel, and we would support that as well.
Yeah, please be assured it's absolutely on our list as we number crunch and understand what the difference is between mocks and predicted grades and what the actual grades have been allocated. We are having a look at that, but conversely, I'm also hearing that small schools have been disproportionately affected by downgrading as well. So I think whatever school your child goes to, I think you're on social media saying it must be something to do with this sector, and it may just be to do with the methodology across the board. So I think we just need to be prepared for that, but we do need to take a little bit of time just to understand it, and obviously we're working out there. I think our careers advice service and our schools are working quite hard to make sure, I like to think about exams as our gateposts to our, they're there, that we take them because it tells us which progression path we need to go on, where we need to get to. They're a means to an end, aren't they? And so the bit for us is how do we ensure our children get to the end that they want to get to, isn't it? And that's where the needs to be. But absolutely, we'll be happy.
Pathways.
Absolutely, we'll be happy to look at that. And I want to look to see whether there's any other forms of discrimination that might be in play that often you find when the use of algorithms are put in place. So whether that's around race or gender or our children with SEND. So we've got to cut it in lots of different ways and understand whether any children were disproportionately affected.
Thank you,
That's
Mel.
great, thank you.
Joanne, I think you wanted to.
Yeah, I was just going to support what Mel had just said, really. And you know, our colleges, sixth forms, and next, you know, I've got a sort of two. They're at both sides of this. There's the youngsters and their pathways to sort of the youngsters that are leaving them and their next steps and that advice and guidance, and also as being recipients of the youngsters who will get results next week. And I suppose our main focal point has got to be about, you know, there's the statistics, but it's individual children's pathways. And actually, in terms of the, you know, without wishing to comment what's happened in Scotland, but what that means to receive something that you've not been able to prove yourself on, and but getting you to your next stage in your learning journey. So that's going to be where we're working closely with our colleges, C&K careers, with our schools, and that's got to be our focus. But I agree, we must look at groups of youngsters and at institution level as well. It's important we use those connections that we do have back to the DFE. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if anybody else wants to make any comments about that particular issue, or no, it looks to be fine. Okay, and I think the other items on the work programme will be coming in back to future meetings, most of which will be virtual in the programme. Right. Thank you very much, everybody, this afternoon for your attendance and your contributions. That's most appreciated. Our next meeting of the Children's Scrutiny Panel will be on Thursday, the 1st of October at 2 p.m. And look forward to seeing people at that meeting then. So thank you. So that's the end of our scrutiny meeting for this afternoon. If members of the panel just stay online until we share that all the recording and archiving is tied up. So thank you very much, everybody.